Right, last week I couldn't talk about that card. The main event was a bamboozle, whatever you want to call it. The rest of the card was quite good, but I want to start off with this fight here. Angel Pacheco versus Caolan Loughran. For me, I'm going with Loughran to KO him in the second round. Not the first round, because I believe Angel Pacheco's chin can hold out against Loughran in the first round, because he's not going to be tired. But it's after the first round, because he can throw with a high output, he can get tired. And Loughran's a guy who, he doesn't have a very high output, but he throws strikes that if they land on your chin, they will wobble you and hurt you. He couldn't do it against Lapillus, and I know you might be like, if he couldn't do it to Lapillus, how was he going to do it to Pacheco? Lapillus is a guy who can use his range and beat people up with the jab pretty much. It's so hard to close the distance when you have a guy like him who can stop takedowns and can just jab you in the face out of range. Pacheco hasn't got that massive reach advantage over him, so he's going to be able to deal with that. Plus, Pacheco's not going to be able to take him down either, because Loughran looks bigger than him, he's stronger than him, he has relatively good takedown defense if you watch him in Cage Warriors, and he also has power as well. So in the second round, he'll start to get tired, and he gets his back up against the cage, and he's one of those fighters where, unlike O'Malley, where he can move off the cage, he sometimes sits back in the cage, and that can open up opportunities for Loughran to use his power and start hitting him to the body and then ripping him up to the head against the cage. Because if you don't move up against the cage against guys with power, they're going to connect on your chin eventually, and that's why I think Pacheco, for as good as you might think his chin was to survive in that gritty fight, I think he will get knocked out in this fight, because he also engages in the gritty fights as well. He's not one of those fighters where he likes to stay out of range and use loads of rangy strikes. He likes to be in the middle with you, body work, leg kicks, and all of that type of stuff. Right, this fight here could end up having a lot of value if you get it right. And I do think, at first I was thinking Malkoun. I'm actually going with Andre Petroski to beat Malkoun by decision. I don't think he's going to be able to KO him. Malkoun's a guy where he can be KO'd because he's a bit on the outside, he looks quite slow. He's not really a fast, really technical fighter. I don't know why I said really like that, but he's not one of those guys. He's quite slow, and so is Petroski at times, but he carries more power, and he's more of a striking threat than Jacob Malkoun. I know he got put away by Michel Pereira, but Michel Pereira can put a lot of these middleweights to sleep if you dare to try and strike with him. And also, in that fight with Gerald Meerschaert, his striking looked very sloppy as well. For example, he was wailing overhands, and you could argue that in the first round, Meerschaert won that because he looked like he landed the more effective, not effective, but the strikes that looked like he was kind of controlling it, compared to Petroski, who was just looking to land a haymaker and scuff him and touch him a little bit, but not do anything major. And I think against Malkoun, because he's got the takedown defense, and I've noticed also when he comes up against a guy who can actually grapple as well to a high degree, he tends to struggle. So I do believe Andre Petroski is going to be able to not knock him out, but I could see him dropping him in this fight, because Malkoun's going for takedowns. He stops the takedowns, therefore leading to them both having to strike in the feet. That haymaker style on the feet could be a problem, because with haymakers, even if you're a grappler and you look to try and take advantage of when someone swings wide, when you come up against a guy who's a grappler predominantly, they know how to stop it. So even if he swings wide and he leaves his body open, he'll be able to sprawl them takedowns because of the strength, the power he's got. And also, look at the height. I know height doesn't mean everything, but I think Malkoun, with how slow he is, he's going to struggle to land on the chin clean at points in the fight. And you could also argue in that fight with Brendan Allen, he didn't win that fight. Yeah, you might want to be like, oh yeah, he did. But I don't think he did, and he lost. So, I know you might think that's irrelevant right now, but I'm just saying, I think Petroski is going to go out there, stop the takedown attempts by Malkoun, make it a striking fight. And I think Malkoun's striking is not that great. It's very basic. And Petroski having the power is going to look better to the judges, therefore wins him the fight. Right, this fight here is one of the most exciting fights on the card. I know it's a prelim, but some of these prelims do deliver. For example, you had a guy, no, I'm joking. But anyways, Aslan against Anton Turkalj. Again, at first I was thinking Turkalj, because with Aslan, one thing I've noticed about him, he just looks intimidating. If you saw this guy in the street, you wouldn't want to fight him. If you could pick, who am I going to fight in the street? You'd pick this guy. But obviously you don't pick fights based on that. Otherwise, you'd look at those old pictures of Gaethje and think, oh, you could beat him in a fight. But obviously you couldn't. So, for me, I'm going with Iber Aslan. Because one, Anton Turkalj has taken a lot of damage, which is why I'm going for KO. And I think he can do it in the first round. I know he took 6 months off. Tyson Pedro's now retired. But if you watched back that fight of Vitor Petrino, he was leaving his chin so high in the air and he was getting beaten up badly. So no wonder when he fought Pedro, all that damage that accumulated from that fight against Petrino built up and it made it easier for him to get the KO. And I would argue that Iber Aslan has more power. And when they fought before, if you didn't know, they fought in Brave FC. Iber Aslan was looking to like clinch him, and he kind of reminds me a bit like Petrino in a weird way, because he should strike more, but he can wrestle, and I don't get why he would do it against a guy like Turkalj, who's got that submission threat, compared to him striking on the feet, knowing that his chin's a bit compromised, he's been taking a bit of damage. I know he's young, but when you take significant amount of damage young, it's not going to benefit you and you're getting into these wars early. I don't know what he does in sparring, but I think Iber Aslan should be able to go out there in the first round. But if it goes to the third round, Turkalj by submission, because I think all that muscle on Iber Aslan, and because he looks to throw with so much power, he will gas out. So he's one of those fighters where he has to get a finish early, because if he doesn't, or like early in round 2, he will get tired because of all the oxygen that has to go into the muscle and end up getting like finished by exhaustion and getting taken down because he's just so tired, so he can't defend it. But I've got the confidence in him. He knows how he fights now. He knows what to do. Keep it on the feet. Don't look to wrestle with him and look to find the KO. If you learn off Tyson Pedro, you should be able to win this fight by KO. And then we have Conor Matthews versus Dennis Buzukja. I don't know how to pronounce it. He trains with Aljamain Sterling and Merab, I believe. I know it says Alongo and Weidman, but I believe he did because they were in the corner, unless... Yeah, I've got it wrong. Ignore me. Conor Matthews. For me, I think Conor Matthews is going to win this fight. I know you're going to be a bit surprised. Honestly, I know he hasn't done it in a year. I think he's going to submit him in the first round. The thing about Dennis Buzukja, he's not bad. Well, I might be wrong about that. But he tends to make the wrong decisions. Like when you have a guy like Sean Woodson, who is a boxer predominantly, who never looks to grapple in a fight, taking you down and holding you down, it's quite worrying. And then it makes me think, if a guy like that's doing it to him, Conor Matthews is one of those strong grapplers who can fatigue in the third round. And a bit like Dennis Buzukja, he can also gas as well, so it could either be a submission or a decision. I don't really think Conor Matthews is going to KO him, because that's where Dennis Buzukja's game will be about, is looking to outstrike him. And one thing about Conor Matthews as well is one of these precious strikers who looks to counter. I know it sounds like an oxymoron where it's two contrasting things, like it shouldn't make sense, but he does. He pressures people, but he's not what your stereotypical pressure fighter would be, where they're in your face and they're looking to throw first. He's waiting for you to throw whilst pressuring you and then countering off that. And he hasn't got too much power, but he likes to throw a lot of teep kicks to the body, and that could slow down Dennis Buzukja and also look to take him down. And when he's on the ground, he does give away his neck quite a lot, which is why I'm going with submission, because if you look at that fight with Sean Woodson, he was going for submissions. And when does he ever go for submissions? He's a boxer who had an amateur record back in the day, not a jiu-jitsu expert. So if Conor Matthews is able to evade this, weather the storm from earlier on, I think he should be able to get him down and look for a submission in the first round. But honestly, I should be looking at second round, but I think I'm confident in him just based off how he starts off so fast. And Dennis Buzukja, after that fight with Jamall Emmers, that was worrying, the way he got KO'd like that quick. And yeah, right, Julio Arce versus Herbert Burns. Honestly, he should win this fight, Julio Arce, and I think he's going to KO Herbert Burns, but I don't think he should be that high of a favourite. It's not one of those like locks where this is like the type of fight you'd expect if CM Punk fought against, well, no, when Mike Jackson fights, and even then people weren't getting a heavy favourite, they got moderate. So Julio Arce for me is going to KO Herbert Burns in the the first round. Let me think. Yeah, he's been inactive for a while. The exhaustion thing kind of worries me. Not only that, it's the fact that he's 36 years of age, hasn't been in the cage for a long time. I know his brother's doing well out here, but he's not his brother. And when you take a year out at that age, and remember, I also have that rule now, 35 years and up, I wouldn't pick them, or I wouldn't really want you to I wouldn't want you to put something on that fight. But even here, there's no value in this, even if you think Arce will win, because look at the odds on that, way too high. And maybe you might want to accumulate him or something, but even then I'm not going to encourage you to do that. This is the type of fight I'd stay away from, because what if Julio Arce gets a bit confident and tries taking him down? I know he's got good jiu-jitsu and all that, but so does Herbert Burns, and I don't like it when, look at Ricardo Ramos, a guy who dropped him early, decided, you know what, let me just try and grapple with him, bottles the fight. I hope Julio Arce don't do something like that, because he could easily knock him out on the feet, because Herbert Burns' striking is not that good. He's got good jiu-jitsu, but his striking is very mid, and he got outworked by Algeo, and Julio Arce has a very tight guard, and when he holds up like that high boxing guard like that, and he throws from that guard, it's going to be very hard to touch him and do any damage if you're Herbert Burns. So I think he's going to be pushed up against the cage and get worked with these hooks and eventually put out. Right, Nate Landwehr versus Jamall Emmers. I'm surprised most people are picking Nate Landwehr, honestly. I'm going with Jamall Emmers to win via decision, because, and I think the betting lines have got it actually right for once. Well, not for once, they get it right a lot, but he's got it right now, because Nate Landwehr is one of those guys who's just all heart, and can weather a storm. He can take a beating and just keep coming forward. Jamall Emmers is the opposite. He's not a guy who can take a beating, but he's usually the guy who will hand out the beating on you. Like with volume, he can strike on the back foot, and going backwards, I mean, he's very good as well. And against Jack Jenkins, you could argue he won that fight. The only guys he has lost to are good guys. He beat Corey Sandhagen. I know he was younger back then, but to beat him even back then, you had to be somewhat decent. Like, Sandhagen wasn't just some can back then. He was alright. But Jamall Emmers just has that, like, loose, long-range type of style. And I think that will cause a problem for Nate Landwehr, who tries to get close. And again, likes to do a bit of dirty boxing in the pocket. And if Jamall Emmers doesn't give them opportunities, because he's good at range and has got decent footwork, I think Nate Landwehr is going to be made a bit silly in this fight, in my opinion. I don't think he'll KO him. I know he KO'd Denis Buzukja, but that was one where Denis Buzukja is not even that good. Like, he's lucky to be in the UFC. Nate Landwehr is a good fighter, don't get me wrong, and he has beaten some good names when you actually look at his record, like David Onama, Ludovic Klein. They are good names. I even lost Austin Lingo, you could argue, was good because he's got good cardio. But Emmers is one of those guys who can as well. He's not one of those guys with weak cardio. He can fight 3 rounds, no problem. Good takedown defense. He's not really going to get put into submissions. I know he has before against Pat Sabatini, but like I mentioned before, a very good jiu-jitsu guy. Pat Sabatini is a way better jiu-jitsu guy than Nate Landwehr. Honestly, I think Jamall Emmers is going to do like a striking showcase and beat him 30-27. I know that's quite a hot take to make, but that's what I actually think. I just think he's a better fighter than him. He's quite underrated at featherweight, and he's getting a bit old now. Right, Chidi and Njokuani versus Rhys McKee. Both of these guys have got suspect chins. Very suspect. But if I had to go with one who I believe is going to have a better chin and who has more power, it's got to be Chidi and Njokuani. I don't know how to pronounce the name. Njokuani. Okay, I'm going with a round 2 because I've noticed with Rhys McKee, he's not really a guy who gets knocked out straight away. And I believe against Chidi and Njokuani, his power is extremely good. The only thing about him is he's quite chinny as well. And there was moments in that fight with Angelusa where I thought maybe Angelusa could hurt him in that fight, because Rhys McKee, he's powerful. He's got decent cardio, but the only thing about him is, again, I know you might say if he survived Angelusa, how can you say he has a bad chin? He doesn't have a bad chin. And I know, looking at the rule again, what did I say? 35 and up, don't do it. And again, I wouldn't tell you to put anything on this. And Chidi Njokuani is going down to welterweight, and I think he's going to look huge because he fights at middleweight. How the hell he's made welterweight, God knows, and that could also ruin his chin. But in addition to that, he's going to be bigger than Rhys McKee, so for Rhys McKee to knock him out, he's going to struggle. And also cardio might be a problem because of the weight cut. We'll have to see when he gets into the cage, but honestly, I think his power in his kickboxing, if he can work the body early, and because Rhys McKee's very confident, he'll easily try and throw a bunch of 1-2s in the pocket with you. I think eventually that left hook's going to come from Chidi and Njokuani, that lead hook, and he's going to get flatlined on the ground in round 2. But this fight here on paper looks very boring, but in my opinion I don't think it will be, and I think Bill Algeo, this is a perfect fight for him. This is like karate against Muay Thai, because Carl Nelson's got that, like, he doesn't mind clinching you, he doesn't mind getting them underhooks, getting you against the cage, mixing up some elbows, but I think this is all built for a decision for Bill Algeo. His power, you might not think it's that good. For me, it's not really about power, it's about his technique. Like, people say he's a bit like Wonderboy Thompson, but nowhere near as good. Don't even confuse it with that. I'm not saying that. But he bounces on the toes like him. He likes to do karate. He likes to kick you to the body. He likes to circle out. Good footwork. That's why I say Poundland. Nowhere near the level, but he likes to imitate some of the things that Wonderboy Thompson does. And Kyle Nelson, like I've mentioned before, good leg kicks, can fight you in the clinch very well, but honestly, I know he beat Fernando Padilla, and that's a very good win to have in your record, for me anyway. And I remember I picked him against Blake Builder, but this is just not a good fight for him, because you've got Fernando Padilla, who's quite loose, but his footwork's not amazing, and his chin is good, but he doesn't move his head a lot, so he can be hit a lot, especially by elbows. And Blake Builder as well. Blake Builder, in his last fight, he kind of got outworked. Like, it was against that, I've forgotten his name, but it was that Asian guy who he fought, and he was getting beaten up badly. So for me, not a good matchup for Carl Nelson, and I expect Algeo comfortably to win by decision, and he'll be able to stop takedown attempts by Carl Nelson, and he will never keep his back on the cage. Nursulton Ruziboev versus Sedriques Dumas. Honestly, Dumas he's not even that good, in my opinion. I don't think he is. Nursulton Ruziboev, again, there's a lot of unknowns about him. I know I'm not picking him just because he's from Uzbekistan, because when I watched Sedriques Dumas before the UFC, he looked way more entertaining. He threw way more kicks. He was way more aggressive. Now it's more of like a passive approach to fighting. Like, you look at that fight with Abu Azaita. Yeah, he won that in my opinion, rounds 1 and 3, but they weren't that good. Yeah, he wobbled him with a jab, and then he throws like a kick. But Nursulton Ruziboev, also, look at how he decimated Bruno Ferreira by catching that kick. If Dumas throws kicks, he's going to get knocked out. So for me, I think Dumas has got a fairly good chin. So I do think Ruziboev is going to win this fight by decision, because I think he'll also mix in the grappling as well, because he's going to be stronger than Dumas at grappling. Dumas's grappling is nothing special, honestly. It really isn't. And his jiu-jitsu, I'm yet to see it in the UFC yet. Like Cody Brundage, okay, he laid on top of him because Cody Brundage kept pulling guard. That was the easiest thing. You would have thought that Cody Brundage was Kron Gracie, or one of these jiu-jitsu guys who likes to pull guard, because that's all he did. And Nuzia Ruziboev is better with the reach as well. He knows how to use it. He's good at staying on the outside. He's not like an amazing fighter, and I don't know if he'll ever get ranked, but we'll have to see after this fight. I want to see what he does in this, because if he can start taking him down, mixing up other things, or even maybe finishing him, that would be impressive. But I've got to go with Ruziboev. This one here is another fight where it's like, don't even do it. It's not worth it, because on paper, Bruno Silva should go out there round 1 KO. Honestly, he should. But I've noticed with Chris Weidman, remember, look at the guys he's come up against the last. Brad Tavares, you know what? He looked bad in that fight, but he actually caught Brad Tavares, and he was hurting him against the cage a little bit, like at random parts in the fight. It was strange. And Uriah Hall, okay, your leg broke. There's not really much you can do. And that was his comeback fight, so you might think because of that you might have a chance, but no. The over 35 rule is definitely applying there. He's 39 years of age. His body's beaten up. He's not as agile as he used to be. His grappling's very good, But Bruno Silva's got good takedown defense. He's younger. He's probably one of the hardest hitting opponents he's fought in the last 5 years. And this is not a good look for him. I think this could end up being like the Dominic Reyes fight. He's going to struggle to get the takedowns, and then he's going to be like, what do I do? Well, I'm going to have to strike with him. And then Bruno Silva outworks him, puts him against the cage, and starts whacking him against the cage, and then throws a left hook, puts him down to the ground, and starts the ground and pound before the referee jumps in, stops the fight, round 1 KO. But here's the fight here where you can get good value, and I think it's worth doing. I'm going with Vicente Luque to win the fight via decision. He's either going to do it by decision or submission. I think now, because of that brain hemorrhage he got, he's had to completely change up his style. And he's actually coming down to welterweight to fight this. I don't know why I said that. Yeah, he did. He fought at welterweight before. I just had some brain fog. And that grappling that he did against Algeo was something different. Because he wasn't doing your basic double leg. He was controlling the ankles. He was making it physically impossible for Algeo to move on the ground. And even then, his striking out of range, it looked decent, but he wasn't taking any risk. He wasn't using low fight IQ like we've seen in the past, which has made him take a lot of damage. He actually used his brain, and I think him having this brain hemorrhage, it's not good, and I wish it never happened to him, but it's woke something up in his brain to fight with fight IQ. It doesn't make sense, but that's what I'm seeing in the cage. And Joaquin Buckley is one of those fighters where he's very reckless. He's looking to knock you out violently with his head kick knockout, spinning, jumping back kick like he did to Impa Kasamananga. And look at him now, his record's not on here, but he's doing well in PFL now. That win aged very well. But Vicente Luque, honestly, I don't think he's going to strike at all. I just think it's just going to be pure. It might even be boring, just hugging him on the ground and looking to maintain control for 3 rounds. Make Buckley a bit tired. Maybe keep it a bit on the feet for the last round, but then eventually take him down. And I can see it being a 30-27. No. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. 29-28, because Buckley, he will start off fast looking for a knockout. But I think that's where he might do more damage in the first round, but I think the judges might be biased because Vicente Luque will take him down and get a lot of control time to the point where they're going to look at, oh my god, he got so much control time. We'll forget about the damage and we'll just give it to him. So yeah, it might end up being the Carl Williams against Taffa fight, honestly. Manon Fiorot versus Erin Blanchfield. I'm going with Erin Blanchfield. I think she really is the contender who will be the flyweight champion at one point. So how will she beat Manon Fiorot? I think it'll be by decision. I think she could submit her, but we saw in the last fight that she does struggle to get takedowns against a woman like Talia Santos. But with Manon Fiorot, she has got good takedown defense, which makes me believe they're going to have to strike in this. And remember the rule that I keep bringing up, the 34 plus rule. Over that, you have to look into that quite a lot. And I know that she fights like she is young and she's got good kickboxing and stuff, and she outworked Rose Namajunas, but this is one grappler where obviously she wouldn't beat the men at grappling, but she grapples how, I'm trying to think of what word to use, because she's not better than the men at grappling, but she's just better than the average woman at grappling. She is one of the best wrestlers, probably the best wrestler in flyweight right now. And Manon Fiorot has not been tested by an extremely good wrestler. Mayra Bueno Silva, okay, is a jiu-jitsu who would love to pull guard or get submissions even from standing like we saw in Holly Holm. And she took roids. So I don't want to use that comparison. I want to use it with Erin Blanchfield herself and knowing that her striking is improved and she's got multiple ways of winning it. I don't think she's going to win it by just striking. That would be stupid. If they both strike, Manon Fiorot could knock her out. It's one of those fights. I know she doesn't get loads of knockouts, but because Erin Blanchfield's chin is good, but because she gets hit a lot and we're in a 5-round fight, the chance of you getting knocked out is much higher. But then you could also argue that the fatigue ratio is much higher because you're doing more rounds and you have to preserve cardio. And you can't just spill it all out in the 3rd round. You have to do it in different sequences. But I do believe that Erin Blanchfield is going to be able to hold her own on the feet and then look for the takedowns. Yeah, her striking's better, but then when you're noticing a woman's coming at you, looking to take you down at the same time, looking to take your back, and she does it with volume, she doesn't care. She's got good cardio. She can keep going no matter what. So I don't know if Manon Fiorot can do that at the age of 34. Can she go to 5 rounds comfortably? Yes, she can do 3 rounds fine. But when you've got a woman grabbing hold of you, draining you, getting you against the cage, making you work to try and prevent that takedown, that will take the wind out of you. And then pairing in that she can strike as well. She outstruck Jessica Andrade. I know Manon Fiorot's a better striker than her, but Jessica Andrade's one of those tight, compact strikers where it's hard to beat her at striking. And she did it comfortably. And she has also held her own against Talia Santos as well. So for me, Erin Blanchfield wins this fight. So yeah, thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.